Thanks, can you hear me now? Everyone in the room can hear, so. And our COTE group, COTE is a national organization under the AIA, and we have chapters everywhere. Pretty much where there is an AIA and there's interest in sustainability content. However, while there's a lot we can learn from the mainland, there's also no denying that Hawaii's geography and remoteness and history and culture makes this place and its inhabitants unique. And that brings me to our local initiatives that we have going on for our working group. We're working with local organizations to develop model specifications for building deconstruction and material reuse coming out of our meeting with Reuse Hawaii. And as well as we have a project going on that we're looking to develop for a carbon decathlon, partnering with and Habitat for Humanity. So if you're interested in any of these like initiatives and or looking to get involved with our group, you can reach out to any of us and stay tuned. Developments. Obviously we live on these islands, which at some point not too long ago were completely self-reliant. Today's current system, which the vast majority of goods are imported, and is inherently problematic for our environment. The intent of our series is to discuss the question of what would it take to create a local and sustainable building materials economy. Our first talk was with Quinn Bidham from Reuse Hawaii, which focused on deconstruction. Our second talk was with two companies which use waste products to create new building materials. And our third talk was with a architect who uses earthen, straw bale, and hemp construction. And our fourth talk today is focused on using a locally sourced invasive species of Albizia for building materials. And our fifth talk next month will be with Kamana Beamer, focusing on Indigenous knowledge in land and resource management. Without further ado, I'm happy to introduce Joey Valenti, co-founder of Albizia Project, Wahiwa Design Lab, partner of Atelier 5 Design, and co-founder of Albizia Surf and Coffee Bar. Joey earned his D.Arch from Manoa, where his research focused on the state's low-value forest resources to develop innovative building systems that utilize Hawaii's prolific invasive Albizia tree. This work led to the creation of Albizia Project and the Wahiwa Design Lab as an arm to expand the manufacturing efforts using source materials. And after this presentation, Joey will be joined for some Q&A moderated by Mark Tagawa, principal at G70 and formerly principal at HOK in LA and advocate for green buildings in our area. We're happy to have both of you, and thanks for coming to join and speak with us.
Yay! Thank you, Scott. All right. Yeah. All right, hello everybody. My name is Joey Valenti, and I'm going to share today with you a bit about the Invasive project and some of the other entities that we work with in conjunction with that work, and hopefully inspire you to possibly use Invasive in your next projects. So this is our team. Myself, I'm the essentially general manager for Invasive project, chief designer for everything else that we do, and won't say much more about myself than Scott. Did a fine job at presenting, but Christine Johnson, who is now actually Christine Valenti. Update our website. Yeah, so as of November, her and I are married, and that was 12 years in the making. And I just want to acknowledge that somehow she stuck with me after the entire DR program at UH and the last 6 years on all my wild endeavors as an entrepreneur. And she's our head of operations and many other things. I'll tap into when we talk about some of the other entities. But we also have McKenna, who's our chief creative director, and we work with a lot of contract workers and different specialists on a project-to-project basis. But we have our advisory board, which includes Matthew Lynch, who's our Regenerative Enterprise Specialist, and Uncle Bruce Kehalani, Kehalani Lum, who are our Native Hawaiian cultural practitioners. We also have Eric Bello, who's our manufacturing specialist. And this timeline essentially is a chronological series of 2-year events that more or less sum up the start of this work from my dissertation all the way until the work we're doing today. So the presentation will more or less walk us through these different events that have happened to lead us to the work we're doing. And some of you may have seen this structure at the University of Hawaii a few years back. And this was our kind of starting point for the Invasive project. And it was you could say, postdoc work from my DR program. And that doctorate work started with this problem. It was a realization of how dependent Hawaii's economy is on imports. So I set out and looked to the forest for solutions and discovered the prolific invasive albizia tree. And I quickly learned that the lush forests that we see today, this is specifically a shot from the Manoa Valley, are not what they always look like. This is the shot of Manoa back in 1908. And you can see it's a widely denuded landscape and at that time, there was a major problem with over-harvesting of koa, sandalwood, and high-value species, and animal agriculture, such as cattle grazing, had significantly impacted the forest. And this is Manoa Valley about 100 years later, and how we see it today. And those trees, of course, are albizia. So albizia was introduced to Hawaii from Southeast Asia The botanists at the time had good intentions. This was first brought here in 1917, and their reasoning was to bring in a nitrogen fixing fast growing species that would help to regenerate the deforested landscapes. So what they did not anticipate was the long-term impacts of a fast growing tree. And Hawaii's Albizia, the ones that grow on this in the state here, are actually the fastest growing trees in the world. They don't have the predators and complications of their native range, so they can grow without any anything holding them back, essentially. And this species has become the most costly issue for invasive species in the state of Hawaii. So Albizia is estimated to cover 5% of the state's landmass. Most of that is on Oahu, Hawaii Island, and Hawaii. So this is where we come in. Over the years, we've been creating a market for Albizia wood. And what makes Albizia a regenerative material? Well, what we do in our process is capture a waste stream that would generally end up in the landfill or be left to decompose, releasing carbon into the atmosphere. And all the way down the supply chain, we're creating jobs for the local economy. Every single dollar from that process stays within Hawaii's economy. And whenever a tree is removed, it opens an opportunity for native ecosystem restoration. So this diagram was actually pulled from my dissertation. And surprisingly, it's still very accurate to our process and how the supply chain works. So it starts with obviously removing the tree all the way down to processing the material and the end product that's made into. So this process was essentially implemented through the first prototype, the Albizia structure. And from that, we were able to forge the pathway to proving this can be done. And from this demonstration, all the media and public awareness that it raised led to our first wave of commercial projects. Essentially, it was what kickstarted our business. So with that attention, our next move was to start mapping Albizia removals and collecting logs as they came through. And in that process, we were able to establish all of our industry partnerships. And one of those partnerships actually traces back to Auntie Kehau and Uncle Bruce, who discovered us through the structure at UH once they realized what it was. And their work partially embodies the responsibility of being land stewards for this plot of land in Upper Manoa Valley. And they lease this land from DLNR and the Board of Water Supply. And when they reached out to us, they were inquiring to see if we could help them to remove several acres of Albizia on this space. And that would give them the capacity to help restore the native ecosystem that wants to thrive there and outplant native species and bring food to the community. So over a series of planning and organizing and putting together a proposal, we were awarded some of the CARES Act funding actually in 2020. And that provided us resources to contract an entire arborist crew who helped us to remove upwards of 50 logs from the site. And in the process, we geotagged every log to the tree where it was removed. So we can trace back the source as we turn the log into a lumber, into a product. And these logs, you can kind of see the scale with the guy in the corner there, but some of these trees are ground zero for Albizia where it was first planted. So we're talking, 100+ year old trees. And some of them can come up to 6 feet in diameter at the trunk of the tree. So it wasn't an easy feat for removing them across 3 bridges, I believe. They had to be maneuvered over and brought into the cul-de-sac, small community neighborhood in Manoa. And from there, we were able to truck them out to the sawmill and start the process. And to successfully restore one of these sites, there needs to be immediate outplanting, because when you clear that canopy, there's a seed bank that opens up, allows for regrowth. And can anyone guess what the first species to come back would be? Yeah, it's Albizia. So unless you're proactive and you have a plan and you're actually actively doing the restoration work, the trees will come back. So we organized a work day where several hundred native and canoe plants were donated shortly after the removal was completed, and the community came out to help replant I think several hundred, maybe 200 to 300 trees. And those range from koa to ulu, banana, and several other native species. So that outplanting was tracked through the similar geotagging process. We were able to trace each tree that was planted and monitor their progress. And a group from University of Hawaii organized and took the lead on doing monthly work days where people come out, volunteer, and help to maintain and manage that area. And they've developed a website where you can go on and volunteer for those work days in a month. This was actually taken 3 weeks ago, where we went out and planted another donation of trees. I think it was another 300 trees. And the image actually shows the little guy in the corner there is my son, my 4-year-old son with the hat. And he's out there planting trees. So it's quite a beautiful thing to see a site that was once acres of Albizia now completely restored and looking like it once did back in the days when it was thriving native species. So this land is very sacred. And the work we do here follows a strict protocol. You start with the pule or prayer before you enter. You bring offerings and you ask Keakua for blessings and protection. And this is something we take very seriously, especially working with auntie and uncle, as they're the native farm practitioners that we look up to for this work. We like to follow their guidance and how this should be done. And take a water drink. So, what do we do with all these logs? Well, we built out a new sawmill that specifically designed for dimensional lumber. And we've been stocking dry lumber in various dimensions. We primarily work with 1x, 2x, 4x dimensional lumber, but we can also do custom sizing and even custom slabs. And with advanced machinery and different capabilities within the shop, including CNC, molder, and just about every other wood shop tool you can imagine, we can manufacture anything a designer brings to us. So one of our first commercial projects was a wave sealing grill system that was designed by Dean Sakamoto Architects. And this project was built at Elemental Accelerator, their downtown office space. And we call the projects that we do within Albizia project that are specifically to our workshop type work, the design lab of Wahiwa, because we're set up in Wahiwa. So that arm is where we kind of bring in all the millwork and manufacturing side of our projects. And we like to work with broad kind of clients ranging from nonprofits to commercial contractors. This is Sustainable Coastlines Hawaii, one of the nonprofits that we worked with a few years back, where we made a fleet of waste diversion receptacles. And you can see these at all of the surf contests. You can see them at the beach cleanups they do and all the public events. And we came up with like an engineered, almost a butcher block design for them that would be durable and have the aesthetic that they were looking for, kind of a reuse type material look, which evolved from what they had before, which was all plastic bins, something that they're trying to get away from.
Is that natural hue or is that dyed wood? Is that just the natural grain of the wood?
Oh yeah, so it's a salvage mix of random species from the shop. Not all Albizia, but Albizia is in there. So we call it just a salvage mix species because it's like 4 or 5 different species in there. And this is stuff that it's offcuts essentially, fall off that would end up in the chipper, turning into the mulch. So we try to be creative with keeping some of that waste as well. And that's really in line with Sustainable Coastline's mission. Their motto is waste is a resource. So we came up with a way to utilize a lot of the other waste within our shop. That's not just Albizia. And we use the same product, butcher block style, for all of their sand sifters, which is a microplastic, basically sifter for beach cleanups. And we developed a 2.0, which was essentially a handheld sifter versus a 2-person that they ended up turning into one of their products. And we actually have this as one of our best-selling retail items on our site as well. Kind of a minimalist sand sifter concept. And we do design build work, mostly interior build outs. This is a life-size logo of Purple Maya, their co-working space. They're a startup accelerator program. And they inquired to have us do essentially a co-working office space build out. Did all of their cabinets, their tables, their desks, and some partition walls and doors between their spaces that were like a soji modern type of design. And this is a Island Brew Coffee House So one of our, within the design firm that I'm a part of, A5, this is one of the clients. And we did another ceiling, wave. I don't know if it's quite a wave ceiling, but I'll explain in the next slide, the ceiling grill system that we developed. And all of their tables and shelving and different accents we used Albizia for. And so that wave ceiling was actually, what we came up with was if you take the log, and you'd probably heard of like a live edge or a natural edge. So we rotated the log and sliced all the live edge off of it, as you see in this image. And then we sequenced it in an array to get this pattern, and obviously spaced it out for the size of their span. But yeah, this was a unique type of approach to using that, creating that wave pattern, but using the natural edge of the wood. Patagonia store in Ward has a lot of Albizia accents on display, a lot of different elements throughout it. This was a workshop Hawaii architects project. COVID years, around 2020, we did have a slow kind of downturn and got creative in that process and came up with some product line furniture. We used a Japanese joinery where we didn't have any glue or screws in the joints. We came up with a limited run of Albizia lamps. One of our more recent projects, I'd say it was definitely more custom than most, is a complete outdoor gym set for One Hotel Honolulu. And this gym set was entirely built out of Albizia wood, except for the lead weights and the metal bars. So we essentially came up with a lead weighted barbell and dumbbell set, complete set. You can kind of see where the plugs are and the lead weights were inserted. So we got that precision weight of each of those dumbbells and barbells to actually be what the number is. And the racks, as you can see, the benches, every element of the gym set is Albizia, which is very contrary to what anyone could ever imagine this would be. I'm actually gonna hand out some samples. So you guys feel pass those around. Feel the lightness of this wood. So it's almost like a pine or balsa. But it has a nice strength to weight ratio. So it actually, strength wise, is similar to fir. And for us to get the weights was quite challenging to turn, a 10-pound piece of wood into 45 pounds. But we were able to achieve that with the CNC capabilities and getting the weights kind of measured out. And our latest endeavor is these ocean watercraft items. There's one on display at the front here. And this project's been in the making, kind of under wraps with our partners for years, but in 2021, it picked up some momentum. We actually were awarded a $250,000 USDA Forest Service grant to bring this concept to the market. And the idea started, I want to say, nearly a decade ago, where this prototype was collaboration with legendary shaper Dick Brewer. If you're familiar with the surf industry, he's since passed a couple of years ago, but he's been one of the groundbreaking game changers in the industry for performance surfing. And with him, we developed a CNC ready chambered surfboard. So in the I won't say mid-1900s, was one of the founders of that chambering technology. And to this day, that process is done meticulously by hand. So we introduced with his assistance, digital fabrication to be a production-friendly process. And in combination with the CNC, we do the final shaping still by hand, which has a hand craftsmanship element to it. But all the interior things you see that you can't see going on to get the weight down is all done with the CNC. And we use for our glassing and polishing, we use a bio epoxy, which is definitely not traditional way of glassing. We found the surf industry is actually quite toxic, and they often use carcinogenic polyester in their glassing process, which is toxic for environment and human. So we really just try to steer clear of using anything with those properties. And the boards perform as well in the water as they are as beautiful on display. So Christine and I, as we were developing this new entity, had this shared vision of creating a retail space. Now she had this idea of a little coffee cart that she could roll out every now and then, kind of as a supplemental part of the experience. Well, I may have turned her little cart into a full-blown coffee shop. And we really had no idea what we were getting into. But over the last, I'd say, 2 years, we put all of our energy into building out this old storage bay. It is located in the industrial park of Waiua, where our wood shop is. Same center, but just across the street. And we officially launched in May of 2023. So the shop, it celebrates surf culture, craft coffee, sustainability, and community. And it acts as our showroom for all the Invasive products, in addition to surfboards, and offers an elevated experience for customers. And quickly it's evolving into community event space, art galleries, co-working. And I'd say overall it's been going well. Christine might challenge that. She had a lot of venting today over our lunch break about employees and managing and how this wasn't what she signed up for. But it's actually doing really well. For being 6 months into it, it's just growing pains. And next time you guys are coming up to the North Shore, you guys pass through Waiua, I invite you to come say hi, grab a coffee, see some of the Invasive we have on display. And for the coming year, in our sites, we have a 10-acre, potentially more. I think it's a pretty wide range, 10 to 50. We committed that we can take on 10, but it could be a phasing of up to 50 acres, where we'll remove and restore, just like we did in this Manoa site, but at a much larger scale. And this is the Helemono Forest that's owned by the Division of Forestry and Wildlife. And with these plans, we hope to expand our inventory of lumber products for commercial markets. This is another A5 clients project that's going to be built this year. It's a residence at Kukui'ula, cross-laminated timber, so it's gonna make some waves in that. If you're familiar with cross-laminated timber, doesn't quite exist in Hawaii. It's a much more prevalent in the Pacific Northwest. The client is from there and was very interested in being the use case for it. And that project is going to be our first complete door, window, and millwork package using Invasive. We have several other commercial projects and custom millwork projects in the pipeline that we're looking forward to showing the potential in the coming year. We have websites for all the entities that I mentioned. Invasive project, and I'll have this on display on the last slide. Waikea Forest for the volunteer signups. If you're interested in learning more about the restoration work. Bezia Surf. And if you have any interest in the work we're doing, feel free to reach out to me or Christine. You can connect with us directly, and happy to help put out Bezia on your next projects. Mahalo.
I think we can set up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was incredibly impressive, Joey. And you know, we had a chance to chat a bit before the presentation, and you're talking about the journey from school to where you are now. What would you say has been the most gratifying part of this process you've been on?
Oh, that's tough. I'll try to lump in a few ideas into one, but the restoration work I think is the most gratifying because it's really connects us back to the land. Like I've spent about my life here, so I feel an obligation to be doing something that's good for this place that helps it to be more in line with what it was, before contact. And it's a hard thing to do in our industry. We're constantly building, and I think the saying is like the most sustainable building is an unbuilt one. But the reality is that's just what we do. So to be, I think, doing that in a way that they say is mono, where we're providing something that's actually benefiting the land. When we do the work, like the restoration, that it just reminds us that what we're doing is in line with that.
Well, I have a ton of questions, but before I get into that, and anyone here have anything?
Yeah, I almost feel a little silly asking this, but can we roll back the train quite a bit? And for somebody really uneducated like myself, what makes the invasive species so detrimental to the environment or the land here?
Yeah, I did skip over that a little bit. So Albizia, there's a few things there. So because it's such a fast growing tree, the root system often isn't as proportional to the size of the canopy. So in big windstorms, the trees can topple over, making it a big hazard to pedestrians. Oftentimes these are in the forest, but you know, you see them on the side of the road, on the highways. They're more and more being removed now because of this issue, but, you know, the trees have done some serious damage in certain areas, especially like in hurricanes. On the Big Island, there's a lot of, history of that. They had, an incident, I think, Hurricane Azelle was, where the trees pretty much closed off access to the community because they just took, just like so many of them had fallen. There's a lot of cases of them taking out power lines, falling on houses. You know, anywhere there's these hazard trees, those are like the priority right now. So there's that factor. They have also this phenomenon called sudden limb shear, and I believe it's because the limbs take on so much water, and it's like a way for the tree to continue to grow taller. So they'll just drop limbs. But when it's a 6-foot diameter tree, the limb can be 2 feet, 3 feet diameter, right? So you're talking like a car falling on something. So those are two major factors. They shade out native species. And like I was saying in the restoration work, if you're not active with the restoration, they'll grow and immediately shade out everything else. They just outcompete since they grow faster than anything else. They're very prolific in their seed pod systems, so they spread like wildfire. And I don't think there's a clear path to eradication. Just the cost of that is not realistic. So I think it's more management now is what the state's trying to tackle, and you know, prioritizing the hazard ones obviously, and then these larger projects where it's like, you know, acres of it, I think is where we come in, and we can not just like cost the state money to take them out, but we actually create an economy around that removal. But yeah, I think those are the main points about it being a problem for shading out natives, choking them out, and then just the hazard of the trees.
So when the state said like, okay, we got these hazard ones that need to be removed, do they kind of like donate those to you guys? Like, hey, here's free trees for your lumber and stuff?
Yeah. So before we were in the picture, there was a stigma around this tree because of all the damage it does, just how it's so invasive. That it was only bad, right? It's just everything around it was a bad word. Basically, like when you say it, it's like it makes people cringe. So we had to kind of overcome that over the years. I'd say it took 5 years to actually reach that point. But it was a challenge because, you know, creating a market around something that nobody likes is tough. But I think once you reach that critical mass and you have enough projects to show and for people to understand, and our physical location has actually been very helpful. As people come and they see an example of it, you know, a use case. A lot of these projects that we do, there's not like signage, you know, so unless they're telling the story about, hey, this is from this, and this is the story of our why we use this product. Most people aren't even going to know that, you know, that ceiling is Albizia. So. Well, yeah, back to your question, yeah. So that I went on a tangent there, but yeah, they just give us the logs essentially. So if we don't take it, they will take it to the landfill in most cases. There's a few others that are willing to use it, but not too many, like at our scale. So we're gladly accepting, you know, any trees that come down. Sometimes there's large, I mean, like hundreds of trees that we can't even, because if you don't mill the logs like within a year, they do start to break down and just the value just degrades. So there's been times where we've had to just say, we're at capacity. You know.
There appears to be a handful of questions that are popping up. But before we get to that, you touched on eradication not being truly realistic. What surprised me was that when you do take down the trees, you immediately have to restore the land because it'll just come back. And just that effort seems extraordinary.
Yeah.
I mean, with the amount of Albizia we have on the island, and to truly get rid of it, it's almost just as much effort or more effort to take care of the land and replant it before it comes back.
Correct.
I mean, that was something that was really interesting.
Yeah, that's why I think, eradication is probably not realistic, because who's gonna take on that much restoration?
Most effort.
Yeah, post that
Yeah.
and continued, right? Like even that 2 acre site, if that crew was not monthly managing that, the Albizia will still take over. They have to like cover crop and make sure that that seed bank dies off before you really, and then there's still, every acre around that circle is still Albizia, so they're dropping more and more seeds. So yeah, it's a very complex process.
Scott, do you have some more questions?
Yeah, sure. One of them was, what would it take to scale use of Albizia as a replacement to ordered structural? How does the cost compare to?
So I don't see it, so the problem with that replacement concept is the industry that's set up when we're getting our imports is at such a large scale that I don't think we'll ever be able to compete unless there's significant incentives from the state, which would make sense, but I just don't see that happening.
Basically subsidizing.
Subsidizing, yeah, otherwise it's like, I don't think it's set up in a way, because those are plantations, right? So they're harvesting like very efficiently, yeah, and it's set up for that specific manufacturing or production of logs and lumber. And what we're working with is kind of it's very random, right? Like this is just trees in the valley. There's no like, evenly spaced and organized system. So surprisingly, we do have plantations like that. They're not Albizia. There's eucalyptus and other species that were planted intentionally for plantation use. But that's a whole other topic. So I think to sum up that answer, I don't know if that'll ever be the case. I think, our approach is a little bit more of a niche market where it's non-structural applications. I think there may be some creative ways to do like lamb and create like a product around stuff like that, those value-added items. But because a gulam, is an exposed beam, so there's some beauty in that if you leave it. But if you're talking about replacing Doug fir dimensional, you're just hiding the product, right? You don't actually see it. So I don't see there being a clear path to be as competitive as what's being brought in. There have been attempts actually at plywood. There was I think it's called a veneer mill that peels logs into those sheets so you can make the ply. It wasn't successful. I'm not sure why. I think this was like 20 years ago. I was reading up on it, but we had a lot of inquiries about plywood. We have in the shop, we have a press, like we could do it, but it's probably 3 times the cost of what you're going to get from a plywood Hawaii sheet. Yeah, that's a challenge. I think we're at right now is the infrastructure. There's really not much, so we've kind of had to build out our own. We're operating at a relatively small scale for the lumber industry, but I'd say we're one of the leading in terms of like how much we're billing in the state. But or there's, the industry here is quite small relative to the mainland.
If you could scale up your processing and your ability to store material, how much of the 5% of the island is actually feasibly accessible? You know, the Albizia you were mentioning is taking up, I think, over 20,000 acres, but I'm sure a ton of that, I mean, it's not realistic to even get to.
Definitely, yeah. I don't have the answer to that. I don't know what he knows the percentage. Yeah, so there are specialists that will know, but there's two approaches actually to the managing, kind of like our approach is the accessible ones. And I think we have years till we can actually tackle that, because I know of several sites that are accessible. I just don't know the quantities. But the ones that are out of reach, there's different organizations that are doing actually poisoning the trees and they're killing them standing. So that's kind of how they're tackling those ones on the mountain sides. So I think combining our efforts, we're actually doing, both sides of the work, because those ones, we have to helicopter out. There's really no use for them. So what they're doing, it works, for that. And you can actually see it in Manoa, I think, there's sites that we've recently done. You look in the valley and they're just standing dead trees, kind of turn gray and lose their leaves. Those are the ones that they're basically taking down. But yeah, to answer your question, I'm not sure of that number, but I know I've been on Kauai and Big Island where there's much more than we have. So for now, I think we can work with what's here, but if that ever becomes, we ever tackle that, accessible what's here, then I'd say our next move would be on those islands, because I think they have probably 10 times more than we have each island.
So I think there was another question.
Another question. Are you using termite treating the lumber in it? So
we're not termite treating. Like millwork generally isn't treated for interior applications. You can use the Honolulu wood treating for certain projects. That structure, we the one at UH, we had tested some termite treatments. We did like a borate treatment on it. So it can be done. There's a treating pressure vessel. You can couple it's a treating that can do it, but it's only a structural requirement. So because we're using mostly non-structural, you haven't had that requirement, and it impacts like the mill. If you're going to do treatment, it has a different. You have to kind of separate it out from all the others. So nothing that we've. It's very rare that we use treated wood in the shop, and that's just a structural project.
But if it's soft and light, like you mentioned, is it's susceptible to termites? I guess it's a question. Sorry.
Yeah, it is susceptible. No more than pine or some of the other like interior, oak stuff that you're using for interior applications. But it is not a resistant wood. There are some of the eucalyptus has like a higher resistance to it. But Albizia, I wouldn't say it's prone to termites. There are some local woods like mango is one that's like highly susceptible. So it kind of falls more in the average termite resistance. But it would require anything structural, it would be required.
Sorry, along those lines, I think that termites in general, they like softwood, things that are easy to eat, or unless they taste bad, right? So you got saps and other stuff like that.
Yeah.
Hardwoods obviously like to avoid, it's not a hardwood. But this is allegorical, I guess, but I have a contact of mine that talked about the stench of Albizia when it was cut down in terms of what it brings off. I was smelling your samples, I couldn't tell anything.
No, yeah.
But he was just like, how could Albizia possibly be used as a building material? It gives off such a horrific smell.
See, that's one of those like.
Is that cured through the drying process? Or I assume that there might be some saps or oils or something that might be unappealing.
Yeah, it's to me, it smells like almost like a barbecue sauce, when it's like dry. So like you can smell it. It doesn't actually. I kind of like the smell. Maybe I've been around it too long, but it's like yeah, it's almost like a garlicky or some type of like earthy smell. But it's only when it's fresh.
You sound like a small yang. Your
It's-
next business.
Yeah. It's only when you freshly mill it, when it's really wet, you can kind of has that smell. And as soon as it's dry, there's nothing, it doesn't have anything. It's not like a cedar or something where it folds that scent, but it is technically a hardwood. So even though it's like a low density and it kind of has properties of softwood, hardwood is defined by the seed pod system. So it falls into the category of hardwood cedar, but it looks and it feels like softwood. So it's actually kind of confusing, but yeah, I think it is the same susceptibility. I think property wise is like pine. It's like what I like to compare it to.
Yeah, if there's a huge surplus of Vizio, I live in Monroe, I see all those dead trees. They get harvested and it's way more than you can use. Could those just be chopped up and given to H Power and H Power would waive the tipping fee?
That's an energy question. I'm not too sure if they would how they receive it. I know that a lot of it goes to the landfill. I don't know what they do with it. I just have talked to augurists have said they'd rather give it to us because it's free and they like to see it used as something versus landfill. You know, obviously it's never a good thing. So I don't know what they do with it if H Power uses it. I do know why the biomass power plant has been using it. But because it's a lower density, they actually prefer like other species, like the eucalyptus and stuff, because the yield for the same diameter, the same mass of log, you're going to get half the yield as the eucalyptus for density. So they actually don't like to use it, but they do.
This question may be ignorant, but with Albizia being around for 100 years, I would assume some sort of equilibrium would have been established with the trees where they are, especially the century-old trees that you brought down. Has there been any study to any disruption that will create when that does come down and you try to take it back to what it was before it came in?
Yeah, I think
the flora and fauna that has sort of stabilized to
Yeah.
some degree, and
I know that it does impact the watershed. Because if you have the root system kind of holding up the banks and you cut that tree down and that slowly decays and erodes, then you don't have that support on the watershed. So I have heard that being an issue, like in Guatemala. You can't just go start cutting them all down because it diverts waterways and you can actually get like pretty messy. Other than that, I'm not sure. I assume if we completely logged all of Manoa, that could be problematic. We took them all out, kind of like that was done in the 1900s. But I don't think that'll ever be the case. I think it's going to be, sections at a time. And even still, I think, unless like someone's planting something else, then they will come back, right? So something will come back there. So that's a good point. I'm not too sure, other than the watershed, like the impact of the
don't get me wrong, I'm not saying to be.
No, that's
That's more a curiosity.
it's an interesting perspective, yeah.
Sorry, along those lines, I was thinking about, I commend you for asking for permission for tapping into these native land advisors, right, for restoring what was there. You mentioned invasive species, but then you cut down an invasive species, but you replant it with new plants. And I'm only asking this because I'm impressed by by how deep you've gone into the tree itself, and I don't mean for it to sound critical, I'm on your side, I commend everything you're doing. But I've always wondered, like, well, what was before the canoe plants, right? The canoe plants themselves were invasive to a certain extent, right? So like, if you're really gonna take it back to what it was, like, and maybe there's no evidence of that. But do you know, or have you thought of like, all right, what was before the canoe plants and what was Hawaii before contact? Obviously, that's probably hypothetical,
Yeah.
but has your brain gone there? And
That's pretty deep.
sorry,
I
I
like,
figured you'd be.
no,
I figured you'd.
yeah, no, I like the question. I think there are native plants, right? That's why there's canoe plants and there's like designated actually native plants. But I don't know how far back that, where that stops, right? I don't know where it starts and stops. But I think, the first contact, the Polynesians, they get to make the call. Like what they know and what they remember was in their history. So I just defer to them. It's a hard one to say, like how far back you say it goes.
So and then going back to just reading history books or allegorical issues, like these were they called I guess there was sandwich isles, but I was thinking sandalwood was big for a while, right?
Yes.
Was that introduced or was that already here?
I think that was one of the indigenous, like it was already here.
It was.
In Koa. So it's got the rod. Yeah. I think some of those trees. I know those. I've heard some of those forests are like hundreds of things. So I'm assuming.
And that goes into my next question as well. I was going to commend you for your focus on Albizia. But then again, you're a serial entrepreneur as you are, you're wired that way with your coffee shop and your surfboards and everything else. Like you can't help but go into other ventures because you're fearless that way, which is awesome. But there's lots of invasive species, right? And even you said you got wood scraps. It's like, how are you able to focus on Albizia, or are you focused on other things as well? Because there's lots of issues you could say, you know what, I want to tackle this, and then it's like, what's enabled you to focus at least a certain aspect on Albizia and not solve other invasive problems? Question.
Well, it's taken me a decade just to get this one under control. So
you give Christine credit for that? Is that
yeah,
she's the one that's put the muzzle on you?
yeah, she gets a lot of credit actually. Yeah, I mean, there are, well,
You've opened up a can of worms.
No, but
He's gonna tell you all the work we do with all these other.
you don't have to answer that. But as designers,
yeah,
like I've had the question asked at interviews from young designers that say, when does design stop?
yeah,
Like when do you know it's complete? And I'm like, well, the deadline passes. Basically. Like you have to get paid for it because it never stops, right?
Yeah.
Or you're always iterating.
yes, absolutely. I have to be careful with that because I do some. I've learned obviously over the years, like I've done that. I tried like taking on more and more and more, and then I realized, you throw so many balls in the air, some start to fall, right? So, I worked with the Division of Forestry and Wildlife on some, actually the same grant we got, but different years for the surfboards. And that was a Forest Service grant. So I was actually a director of the Hawaii Wood Utilization Team, which is like all of Hawaii's and wood species. And there's a lot, and not all of them are invasive. That was kind of the direction like I started to explore. They kind of scouted me like right after I graduated, so I was, I guess, naive and thought I could take it all on, but that did lead to some interesting things. We're actually about to build, this thing got delayed for years, but this accessory dwelling unit was kind of a similar to the UH prototype, but using some other species. So it was like I mentioned the plantations. So there's plantations, primarily, there's some here, but primarily on Hawaii and Hawaii Island. And they have, pine, eucalyptus, I can't even name, there's probably several dozen species that were planted, and never utilized. And we were talking like really like valuable species that could potentially be like, part of the industry, but there's no supply chain set up for it. You know, these are experimental, so they were brought here, or the Forest Service planted them, and we're trying like, okay, let's try this plantation of eucalyptus and this, and you know, there's actually a lot of material here that's just not being touched.
That's kind of what I'm getting at, is like, I think in your earlier answer, you said, I can't compete with the mainland based on scale.
Yeah,
You just acknowledge, like, you're a disruptor, right? Like, that's, like, there's, you just said there's scale here.
yeah,
It's like, and now that you know what you know, and you're not a young, naive, entrepreneur, yeah, I just encourage you to blow it up, right? Scale it, make it known for the world, and go for it.
yeah. We were just talking about that, and it's difficult in Hawaii. You know, there's a lot of hurdles.
How many sawmills are there in Hawaii?
That's the other.
I'm actually, yeah, part of my job with DOFA was to, I visited almost all the sawmills. I like worked with the feds, they came out and like, we toured all of the islands, and I don't know off the top of my head, but I want to say there's 30 something sawmills, you know, across the state. How active they are, you know, some of them hobby, some of them are like pretty more established production like us. But they're all small, I mean, relative, you know, they're all like.
Honestly, that's shocking to me. I thought there were gonna be like 2.
No, yeah, there's actually an industry, yeah, it's just, you know, when you compare it anywhere else, we're tiny. Like we're barely putting a dent in.
Well, that's the thing too. I mean, I was seeing your pictures of a skid steer and a great all, moving I don't know how many tons that log was across a bridge that may not have been even rated for it.
Yeah, we did the counts on it.
All right, I'm not a lawyer.
It was close.
But there's industries out there that lumber, that forest, right? That forestry industries that have lumberjacks that do this for a living with mech. But in Hawaii, we often need to import our labor.
Yeah.
I mean, what a better use of imported labor to eradicate invasive species and provide something that's a sustainable economic driver.
I agree. Yeah, it's a tough nut to crack. I mean, we're working on it, right? We're working on it at our scale and our pace, but the state, forestry and wildlife, they're working on it at their pace. But it's tough because it's like, yeah, who's willing to put up the infrastructure, before the market is there? And without the infrastructure, you can't create the market. So that's kind of where Hawaii's always been stuck. So it's stuck in that limbo, I think, for 50 years since they planted all these plantations.
Yeah, I think that large contractors will try to use a local eucalyptus product, and then it's inconsistent, it's not enough, and then I'm never doing that again. So it's kind of
the reliability, it's like we can do it, but not, there's a when you say there's 3, I'd say there's 3 to 5 that are capable. It's, and I don't want to speak, down on any other ones, but capable of pulling off larger scale stuff and, not messing up. There's not a lot. So I said a lot of them are hobby scale. They're not really production. More than half of them are just slabs. They just cut slabs, monkey pod slab and stuff like that. Not too many are doing dimensional ones. Actually, I don't know very many.
There's another question.
Have you worked with Hawaii Tourism Authority? Because they want to promote green.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, manufacture all kinds of display products.
Have you worked with them? I don't think so. No. That's a good, yeah, that's a good one, though. I think. I think,
Yeah, there was a question about, does the state have interest in, like creating one, or at least like supporting it, or, the federal government, it's a lot of.
yeah, I mean, the federal government, like the Forest Service, they're very supportive. Like I've initiated 3 of those $200,000 grants. And 2 of them were for the state, for forestry and wildlife. But the one that was for us. So they like when we submit applications. They like when we come to them with ideas. They want to see Hawaii do well. So they have thrown funding at us, but is it enough? There needs to be more like more people that are like doing this work and like really pushing it forward, but there's not a lot, forestry and wildlife divisions, only a small portion of them are doing this part of the work, there's a small team within there that I work with. And there's actually some new, they have lost 2 of their top employees for the last 5 or so years. So they're kind of like struggling with that. And they just got a new one. So she's actually very active. Excited to see what she does. Small.
So there's a question in the chat about if you know of anything similar internationally, looking at our some invasive species and creating an industry around that.
We were in an article, I forget who wrote it, but they highlighted a few, it was all about using invasive species. And there's a few on the mainland, like forget the names, but one of them was doing like I think they call like full logs or something. And they're turning like whole logs into structures. So there are some, but I don't know if there's a use case like too much. Yeah, I guess I don't know if that's considered invasive, but in Bali or Indonesia they use bamboo. There's like a group that's using bamboo for beautiful structures. Actually, that was one of my inspirations in my dissertation. But I don't know if that's technically invasive. It's an abundant material, yeah, for sure.
Curious to know who are like purchasers of wood that you source in.
I'd say primarily like commercial clients, so the hotels. We do a lot of like millwork for residential. We do mostly, I would say, like interior retail and like office, those type of commercial spaces.
Into smaller, limited quantities. So rather than.
Yeah, we haven't secured like a full hotel or something. We're capable, we just haven't had that come through yet. There is one project I don't want to say too much about it because it's not confirmed yet, but there's a festival in the Pacific that's coming up soon, in June, and we might be doing the full like production of their structures. It's going to be at the convention center, and it's like 29 holiday structures, which is pretty significant. So interesting project because we're not milling. We're actually going to cut whole trees, just like traditional holly building. And yeah, that's going to be an interesting one because done something in that way, but the scale is definitely larger side. It's like a village essentially.
Have you been harvesting in other locations beyond Manoa?
Yeah, Manoa was just our first pilot restoration site. So that was where we were able to prove removal and then the active restoration, like continued restoration. The other sites, island wide, I think we probably pretty much got trees from, except for west side, but every other side of the island.
And the restoration process is occurring at all those other.
No, so that's the hard part, is like, you know,
So that, is that where it becomes regenerative then? Because they're gonna go back.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it comes down to the landowner, right, the land steward in that one case, so the Helen One project is gonna be our next scaling of that and showing that we can scale, but. You know, you need the resources, like, we can't fund that at this point in time, like. We wouldn't be able to be as cost competitive with as we are if we had to pay for that. Right? We talked about a nonprofit for that, established. So it's usually been like partnerships with other existing nonprofits. But yeah, it's hard to, like, we've been receiving, that's kind of been our main focus, is just creating the market. And when the opportunity arises, like, we work with that restoration component. But it comes down to the landowner, right? It's like the state's not gonna take that on. You know, residents or the golf course. You know, we get it from like a lot of those types of sites. They have no interest in doing, right, budgeting that out, so. Yeah, the veteran cemetery.
So I had a question related to that, the regenerative aspect of that, and you described it. Because technically, that aspect of Albesia is not positive, that it's regenerative. Right, the intent is to take it down and not have that. Right?
Yeah.
But the way it's being described is that this is a regenerative material, but.
No,
in this case,
yeah.
it's not,
I see what
it's
you're
not,
saying.
it's not a positive aspect.
No, yeah, they have misread that and mispresented that, but, I'm saying the regenerative is the native ecosystem restoration. That has to be a factor for it to be regenerative, because if,
The restoration of the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that makes it a regenerative material. If you're just growing it back, then you're just like every other lumber, you know, lumber source. And I think, you know, the other aspect of it being regenerative, not so much just in like the land, but what it's doing on like the, you know, the multi-dimensional scale of not importing it. You know, that you gotta compare it to like, what's the alternative? If you specify oak on your project versus Albesia, what's that supply chain look like? You know, it's definitely gonna be imported. None of that money is gonna be local. It's all leaving the state. So like, I think there's all these other elements. You know, it doesn't create any local jobs besides, I guess, the contractor that's gonna put it together. But if you're sourcing it from a local material and local business and all of like how I showed the supply chain, and the ideal is like, yes, we're restoring that site where the trees come out, which we hope to like continue that scaling. But I think it's all the other aspects as well, like the economy side, I think works for the word regenerative for like location, right, for the region that it's being used.
Regarding your coffee bar, when people drink coffee, they often get hungry. Any thought of stocking the store with Hawaii made food products?
Well, I should let Christine answer that one.
So we do have a couple pastry items. The banana bread does have locally sourced poi in it. And they're both made at the oat cookie and banana bread are made at a local bakery. We use syrups that are all made with locally farmed ingredients as their base from home potions. So the vanilla is from AIA and the lavender is from Maui, and you know, and then we're hoping to actually add on more breakfast items that are pre-made at local cafes and whatnot.
That'll add to your cash flow.
Exactly. I'll just add to that. I've been poking to bring food into the space, but yeah, I get in trouble if I push too much. So I gotta let her. She manages the coffee stuff. I already like, you know, made it more than it was supposed to be.
Do you have any photos of the cross section of the surfboard?
I don't, yeah, so
Oh,
partner on this is kind of old school, so he's very like protective of the technology or the process, so he only lets me show like very,
it's like going in your
yeah,
head.
you saw it, right?
No, it's also very.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know where it's at, but
That's okay, I saw it.
yeah, it's somewhere in there.
Okay.
But basically that's it though, like if you saw that, it's like chambers through the board, but it's staggered. So that staggering gives you like these walls of strength, right? So it's not just like the whole thing's a shell, there's like little support walls through. Yeah, you can always, yeah, that's what I told, I was like, someone just cut it in half. And, we don't wanna make it too easy.
I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah, sure. Do you have patents? And if not, I hope you do,
On surfboards,
not just anything.
anything, I do not.
Even your sand sifter there that's made out of, like, you're making custom products and even your wave sealing thing, like. And I'm guessing there might be some lawyers in town that could help you out and make sure that. you know,
Yeah,
always lawyer.
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know, so like, that's like definitely more in line with like our partner on the surfboards, like keeping those things, but I guess my perspective is, as long as we're staying, unless like we're really gonna take that sand sifter and like make that our thing, we're already on the next thing, so to me, it's like, someone can go ahead and like rip it off, but like our story is the material, right? So like they can make a look-alike, but if they're gonna start making it out of the same material, I mean, we already have we're like the first to market. We have the reputation, the name, the story behind it. So people would go ahead and like knock us off, but they can't take our story, right? So that's kind of, I guess, where I come from with it. It's like, I'm just gonna keep moving to the next thing, so, yeah. By the time someone does do it, I'm already like 3 more steps back.
Well, Joey, I want to thank you for your presentation and
Thank you.
your time and very hospitable questions that we have. How about another?
Very good questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, please come check us out. The retail space, it's like our long square. Beautiful like display of our BTO.